Hello, today we're going to talk about triphasic trainings, bioenergetics, integration dynamics, and how to implement it into basically any level of athlete or any concept of training and get some pretty amazing results. And with that being said, here's an example of some of the results that I've seen. Basically, we start at week 0 with an athlete, and this is the resting heart rate. This is the range that can be typical of the athlete when I get a hold of them. And here's what transpires through the weeks as we go. On weeks 1, 2, and 3, you get a drop, and this is during the GPP phase, which will be another book of mine that I'm co-authoring. And then the weeks 4, 5 through 6 and 8. And as you can see, what we have here is a resting heart rate of 32 to 38. And this is essentially done with the integration method of the bioenergetics with no conditioning. Now, why does it happen? You'll see why as we go, but it's basically because of the block breathing methods. I have to put a disclosure, we do use RPR, reflexive performance reset, and those are the results that we get. Then later, usually in the summer, we start conditioning our athletes. But it's not typical to have. I've had roughly right around 50 males in the system that are hockey players that are somewhat sympathetic, so usually their heart rates are a little higher, but the resting heart rates are 32 to 38 in that range. So let me give you this example. I call this the functional reserve range. Basically, I have two twins. One athlete, resting heart rate of 65, let's say. His lactate threshold is 165. So his functional reserve range is roughly 100. You just subtract, obviously, between these two numbers. Now, his twin has a resting heart rate of 32. And then what you have is a lactate threshold maybe a little higher because he's a little better shape, and you have a functional reserve range of heartbeats of 140. So the difference is roughly 40 beats per minute. Now, in these two athletes, you'll have to understand what happens with athlete 2 is that you are able to now handle more stress. Okay? You can train harder. You can train with more volume. And this athlete 2 will be able to recover greater, because each workout that you do, if they do the same workout, will be a minimal stress on athlete 2. So therefore, that's why he can do more volume. That's why he can handle more of life stressors. That's why he is more resilient to stress if he has this level of functioning. Okay. Now, theories based upon my biochemical programming concepts I spoke on for a number of years, probably 8 or 9 now, is the intensity and duration should be the focal point of the day. Specificity of exercise program is critical to adaptation. And when I say that, the first question that arose a number of years ago was that why can't a triathlon and a athlete train for a triathlon and a powerlifting meet at the same time? Well, what you're basically getting is the organism pulling in too many different directions, and the biological energy that is used for the body to, let's say, adapt is used up because there's so many stressors that are taking place when you train in multiple directions. So then the question became, how do I manage that? And what we're going to do is we're going to put the system and the bioenergetics concepts all into one management idea. And basically that is you manage your intensity and the time. So instead of running long distances and then squatting heavy, you're going to squat heavy for a short duration, let's say 5 or 10 seconds. And then that's how long you're going to run, because that will allow the organism to adapt at all levels the same way and not pull it in many different directions. Now, as I go through this, people will think, well, this must be for advanced athletes. However, I've done it with let's say, young athletes with minimal training age, what you'll actually find is that the young athletes with minimal training age can actually have great adaptations. Now, they don't have a lot of energy to adapt, but all resources used to adapt are used for this purpose and not pulling it in different directions also. Now, I truly believe a young athlete needs a base before they can start training, and that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about young athletes that have somewhat of a base, maybe 3 to 4 weeks at the most, and then we move into this concept and found that they got greater adaptations of strength and repeated sprintability. Now, with the advanced biochemical programming, I'm going to talk about 4 things basically: heavy back squats, the triathlon, cortisol management with tempo runs, this same concept, super maximal triphasic, and the parasympathetic response. Now, getting to the heavy back squat with tempo runs, many coaches across the country will basically let's say do a heavy back squat and then they go out and they condition. Well, the problem is that the post heavy workouts, conditioning post heavy workouts, will decrease the adaptations at the cellular level. So they work. Everything almost works, especially for non-athletes or couch potatoes or many of the studies that people do on scientific levels of the general population. But when you get to the highest level also, it's a completely different person, and you might have to just hope for 1 to 2% more adaptations. And sometimes adaptations at certain periods of time are more important than actually performing well, which is a whole nother post. Now, just keep in mind that if you do heavy back squats for a short duration, you're running and conditioning, if you're going to do it, should be in short duration at maximal intensity also. So one of the theories that used to get those results also was the cortisol management theory. Basically what transpired was I had a number of pro athletes showing in the NHL or professional hockey had a number of issues with cortisol and where they were storing their fat. And what had transpired was then I hoped I could maybe help manage that. So then I began to realize that maybe we would actually start producing less cortisol if I didn't take him into glycolysis or lactate training. So I set my parameters for the summer at under 10 seconds. All my sets were 10 seconds or less for hockey players, which seems kind of ironic since hockey is considered a lactate sport. However, what we saw was some pretty amazing results because most of my athletes are genetically dispositioned to be able to handle lactate. So it's something they're good at because of their genetics after I genetic tested them. So ultimately the biggest thing is if we can make the 10-second bursts more powerful, more explosive, we actually held off lactate threshold, and with a huge aerobic base we actually hold off lactate zones even farther down the chain of training. So the alactic anaerobic system, what I did was just did 10-second sets, and we actually found that they got leaner. They didn't store fat where it shows signs of cortisol issues. And some people say, well, what about muscle building? With a baseball team we tried it on, we had kids put roughly 12 to 16 pounds of muscle on over a short time frame of 7 weeks. So it was pretty amazing. Something for you to play with and watch with your athletes. Now, here's one thing I need to make you aware of too with this advanced biochemical programming. When I say parasympathetic response, I believe we are all on the same page, where you have a stressor, and then you have the breakdown and your parasympathetic system kicks in, and what transpires is a supercompensation. Now, what transpired with one of my athletes that was in a very intense program that we're going to speak of, this biochemical integration over a 4-year period, what happened was they did my program for 4 years, and then they jumped into a functional training program that, for example, didn't cause the stress that my program did. So this is why it's important to have an understanding of training age based upon your athlete, because what transpired was I would watch this person after the functional training and they never got a parasympathetic response. So basically there was no training effect here to cause this breakdown because their body was so resilient to stress. Now also the issues that can transpire with a functional training program of 3 days, that they'll do a whole body the whole time, and what'll transpire is you'll get some maybe possibly a hormone release, but then the body uses that hormone all over the place, maybe if it's going to heal itself, if there's a parasympathetic response, and there's limited amount of hormones, so how much adaptation can take place with a functional training plan. This could be some of the downfalls of it. They maintained some qualities, but the athlete, with all 11 tests that they had done over a 4-year period, got worse that they were tested on. And this was an athlete at the Olympic caliber level and was involved in a national program. So the integration of the energy system development correctly manages stress to build energy capacities you choose for your athlete. Okay, common mistake, thinking of conditioning as a post-workout modality, which you can, but it has to be the right conditioning, and this is what we're going to structure for you. And the structure of your workout will dictate the various qualities your athletes develop and need. Now, this is general bioenergetic systems, anaerobic creatine phosphate phase, under 10 seconds. The lactate glycolysis, it can be over 10 seconds, even maybe a little farther down the chain, but minute 20. And then the aerobic system is a minute 20 plus. And we can go into heart rate. Now this is very basic. There's obviously fast glycolysis and slow glycolysis in various ranges for each of these zones, whatever you want to break them into, but this is just the general stuff. So the next thing I want you to understand is that the most important system is an anaerobic creatine phosphate system. In especially team sports like football, soccer, what they're finding is if teams are relevantly skilled, the same level, what you get and have the same personnel is a team that's running the fastest at the end of the game is usually the ones who are going to win, and it often decides the game. Repeated sprintability. Now, with the alactic anaerobic system, we're going to break these into two various qualities. These qualities are the high quality ratios or the work capacity, so your ability to do high quality work in the alactic anaerobic system, or your ability to be in condition in this system. Now I'm going to go over this, these two qualities and the difference between them right now.